Welcome back to Teach Me the Bible Stories with Miss Michelle. Today we will look at 2 Samuel 12 through 18, where David faces the consequences for his sin of murdering Uriah, and David's sons face the consequences for their own sin. This lesson is rated PG for violence, especially concerning what happens to David's daughter Tamar. I will be careful with my words, but this is a true story about evil things that unfortunately happened then and continues now. I believe it's best for children to learn about these type of things with a parent there with them to help them process it. But parents, you will know when that appropriate age is. There will be 10 questions at the end. You can earn 100 points. But first, the books of the Bible. There are 12 books of minor prophets: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum. Now for Nahum, we are using the ASL sign for punish to remember this book because Nahum prophesied that God will punish the evil nations, specifically the Assyrians whose capital was in Nineveh. Remember, God sent Jonah to Nineveh to warn the Assyrians that destruction was coming because of their sin. The Assyrians in Nineveh repented. God then had mercy on them. Unfortunately, in the next 100-year period, the Assyrians turned back to sin, in fact, to even worse sin. The Assyrians became known for being extremely violent and cruel to the Israelites and to other nations. Nahum 1:3 says, "The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished." God punishes nations that are evil and oppressive. Nahum 1:7 tells us why. The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in Him. You see, God hates it when we hurt one another, so He punishes in order to stop it. Because He loves and cares for those who trust in Him, He punishes those who are guilty. Okay, are you ready for today's Bible story? Listen carefully. This story is from the Bible, God's holy word. In our last lesson, David let his sin with Bathsheba go unconfessed, and it led him to more and more sin until he had Uriah killed in battle. God sent Nathan the prophet to David, and Nathan told David the story about a rich man who killed the beloved pet lamb of a poor man in order to serve it as dinner for his guest. David was furious at the rich man who did such an evil thing and said that the rich man deserved to die. Then Nathan said, "You are the man." Nathan then asked David, "Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes?" Nathan said, "You struck down Uriah with the sword and took his wife. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house." David heard all that and said, "I know I have sinned against the Lord." David finally confessed his sin. He realized he had sinned against the Lord and done evil. Okay, Nathan told David God's message. What did God say would never depart from David's house because he struck down Uriah with the sword? The sword. Now that means there would be violence in his family. Well, David finally confessed his sin. What did David say? I know that I have what? I know that I have sinned against the Lord. Well, after David confessed his sin, Nathan said, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die, but the son born to you will die." After Nathan had gone home, David and Bathsheba's baby became sick. David prayed and begged God to heal the child, but after 7 days of being sick, their baby died. David went to comfort Bathsheba, and God had mercy on David and Bathsheba. And Bathsheba became pregnant again. She later gave birth to a son named Solomon. The Lord sent word through Nathan the prophet saying that Solomon's name was Jedediah. Now, Jedediah means loved by the Lord. So the Lord was letting David and Bathsheba know that He loved Solomon and his favor was on him. Okay, after David confessed his sin, Nathan said, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die." But who would die? The baby of David and Bathsheba. And David and Bathsheba had a second son named Solomon. But the Lord said Solomon's name was Jedediah. What does Jedediah mean? Loved by the Lord. After David confessed his sin, God forgave David. But that did not mean that David's bad consequences went away. There were two main consequences that God said would happen. One was that David and Bathsheba's first baby would die. That already happened. The other consequence was that the sword would not depart from David's house, meaning there would be violence in David's family. You will see that soon. It began with David's son Ammon, who fell in love with his half-sister Tamar. Tamar was beautiful, and Ammon desired her greatly. But instead of asking to marry her as he should have, he did something horribly evil. He pretended to be sick and had her come and take care of him. But while she was trying to take care of him, he attacked her and raped her. You see, Ammon thought he loved Tamar, but that's not love. Love is not selfish. It does not harm someone. Instead, Ammon used Tamar for selfish purposes. That's evil in God's sight. God hates that. Ammon's love for Tamar then turned quickly to hate. Ammon should have hated his sin, but Ammon's heart was so full of selfishness that he hated Tamar instead. Tamar left there weeping. She then put ashes on her head and she tore her beautiful robe. Tamar's brother Absalom saw her, and he quickly knew what Ammon must have done. Absalom took care of his sister Tamar, but he was furious with his half-brother. Absalom didn't say a word. Instead, he waited for the time when he would take revenge. Okay, Ammon thought he was in love with his half-sister. What was his half-sister's name? Tamar. And who pretended to be sick so that Tamar would take care of him? But while she took care of him, he attacked her. Who was it? Ammon. And who took care of his sister Tamar but was furious with his half-brother and was waiting to take revenge on Ammon? Absalom. Well, 2 years went by. Absalom then invited all of King David's sons, or Absalom's brothers, to his house for a party. Ammon came to the party and began drinking wine. Absalom had given orders to his servants, and they followed Absalom's orders and killed Ammon. After having his brother murdered, Absalom ran away to another city and stayed there 3 years. He knew he could be greatly punished for what he had done, so he ran away. King David grieved for his dead son Ammon, but then King David began to miss Absalom since it had been 3 years since he had last seen him. Okay, 2 years after Tamar was attacked by Ammon, who had a party at his house and invited all of his brothers? Absalom. And what did Absalom order his servants to do to Ammon there at the party? Kill Ammon. Absalom then ran away for how many years? 3 years. Finally, after 3 years, Absalom was allowed to return to Jerusalem, but David refused to see him. Okay, now everyone thought Absalom was very handsome. He was considered the most handsome man in all of Israel, and he had a head full of thick, long hair. Well, Absalom was very upset that his dad refused to see him. 2 years after Absalom arrived back in Jerusalem, David finally gave in and welcomed him. Absalom bowed before David, and David greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. Absalom acted like he loved and respected his father, but in Absalom's heart was a desire to take his father's position as king. Shortly after seeing his father, Absalom began traveling around acting like a king by getting a chariot and horses and 50 men to run ahead of him. Then Absalom started going out early each morning and standing by the road that led to the city gate. Whenever anyone came to meet with King David, Absalom would tell them that King David won't receive them, but that if he was appointed as king, then he would make sure everyone gets justice. Absalom was lying. This was all part of Absalom's plan to win the hearts of the people. Also, when people bowed down to Absalom, Absalom would reach out and take hold of their hands and kiss them. That's what today we call politicking. He was trying to win people over by being overly nice. But Absalom was not nice. He just wanted power. Absalom's plan worked, though. He stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Okay, 2 years after Absalom arrived back in Jerusalem, what did David finally allow? He allowed Absalom to come and see him. And Absalom acted like he loved and respected his father. But in his heart, he wanted to take his father's position as what? As king. And did Absalom's plan to steal the hearts of the people of Israel work? Unfortunately, yes. Absalom went to Hebron and had the people there proclaim him to be king. And since Absalom had already made so many people like him, many from Israel joined his side. A messenger reported to David that the hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. David then decided that he and his family and servants needed to flee to escape for fear that they would be killed. David wept as he left Jerusalem. He covered his head and walked barefoot, showing how deeply upset he was. Okay, Absalom went to Hebron and had people proclaim him to be what? To be king. And when David learned that many from Israel were with Absalom, what did David decide that he, his family, and his servants needed to do? To flee, to escape. David found out that his advisor Ahithophel had betrayed him and was now with Absalom. But not long after, he found Hushai, another advisor. Hushai stayed loyal to David and wanted to remain with him. But David convinced Hushai to go to Absalom so that he could serve as a spy and give Absalom bad advice. Hushai did as David requested and went to Absalom. Hushai arrived there and said to Absalom, "Just as I served your father, I will serve you." Absalom welcomed Hushai in. Soon after, Ahithophel gave military advice on how to attack David and his men. After listening, Absalom asked for Hushai's advice. Hushai said Ahithophel's advice was not good and gave different advice. Everyone liked Hushai's plan of attack better. You see, this was all part of God's plan to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. Hushai then sent messengers to David to warn him about what was going to happen. The battle began, but the Lord was with David and his men. Absalom rode his mule into battle. And when Absalom saw David's men, he rode his mule quickly into the forest. But when he did, Absalom's head full of thick, long hair got caught in a tree. And the mule kept running, which left Absalom hanging in midair from the tree. David's men then took that opportunity to kill Absalom. Joab sounded the trumpet, indicating that the battle was over. When King David found out that his son Absalom was dead, he wept and said, "Oh, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son." David never wanted to fight against his son in the first place. And now his son was dead. And as a father, David was deeply upset. Okay, Ahithophel and Hushai were David's advisors. One betrayed him and went to Absalom, and the other stayed loyal to David. Which one stayed loyal to David? Hushai. And what kind of animal did Absalom ride into battle? A mule. And what happened when Absalom's mule ran under a tree? Absalom's long, thick hair got caught in a tree, leaving Absalom hanging in midair. And was David happy when he found out that his son Absalom was dead? No, he was very upset. Nathan the prophet had told David that one of the consequences David had for killing Uriah with the sword of the Ammonites was that the sword would not depart from his house. We have definitely seen today how violence plagued his family. First, it was Ammon attacking his half-sister Tamar. Then it was Absalom killing Ammon, and now it is Absalom being killed in battle. Ammon and Absalom died young as a consequence for their sins, and David lost 2 sons as a result of his sin. You know, God loves us so much. He wants to protect us from the bad consequences of sin. That is why God warns us in the Bible to flee from temptation, to avoid sin, and to be quick to confess sin before our sin gets worse. You see, all sin has bad consequences. We can choose whether to sin or whether to obey, but we can't choose our consequences. Jesus wants to live inside of us and give us the power to say no to sin so that we don't sin and then we don't have those bad consequences. Pray and ask Jesus to give you a heart that loves Jesus so much that you want to obey him, and to give you a heart that hates sin. And trust that the Lord always knows what is best, and his instructions are always for our good. Okay, are you ready for your 10 questions? Just hit the pause button if you need a little bit more time after each question. Question 1. Nathan told David God's message. What did God say would never depart from David's house because he struck down Uriah with the sword? Time, the sword. Question 2. After David confessed his sin, Nathan said, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die, but who would die?" Time, the baby of David and Bathsheba. Question 3. David and Bathsheba had a second son named Solomon, but the Lord said Solomon's name was Jedediah. What does Jedediah mean? Time, loved by the Lord. Number 4. Who pretended to be sick so that his half-sister Tamar would take care of him, but while she took care of him, he attacked her? Who was it? Time, Ammon. Number 5. 2 years after Tamar was attacked, Absalom had a party at his house and invited all his brothers. What did Absalom order his servants to do to Ammon there at the party? Time, to kill Ammon. Question 6. Absalom acted like he loved and respected his father, but in his heart he really wanted to take his father's position as what? Time, as king. Number 7. When David learned that many from Israel were with Absalom, what did David decide he, his family, and his servants needed to do? Time, to flee, to escape. Number 8. Ahithophel and Hushai were David's advisors. One betrayed him and went to Absalom, and the other stayed loyal to David. Which one stayed loyal to David? Time, Hushai. Number 9. What happened when Absalom's mule ran under a tree? Time, his long, thick hair got caught in a tree, leaving Absalom hanging in midair. Okay, number 10. Was David happy when he found out that his son Absalom was dead? Time, no. He was very upset. Okay, how many did you get right? Now multiply that by 10 and that's your score. Now I have 2 assignments for you. I want you to go read 2 Samuel 13 and 18. Then go tell someone what you learned today. Come back for our next video in our Teach Me the Bible Story series. See you next time.